30 years. That's how long I dreamed of building something with my own two hands on my own piece of land. And when I finally broke ground, I never imagined that one person's thirst for power would turn my dream into a nightmare. But what she didn't count on, was that I fight back. Stay with me, because this story gets wild. My name is Mike, and this story takes place on 5 acres of beautiful countryside that my wife Sarah and I bought 15 years ago. We specifically chose this land because it was far from subdivisions, far from homeowner associations, and far from people telling us what we could and couldn't do with our own property. For 3 decades, I dreamed of building a workshop where I could create furniture, teach my kids woodworking, and maybe even start a small business. Sarah always said, "Honey, when you talk about that workshop, your whole face lights up." And she was right. After years of saving every penny, we finally had enough. I spent months working with architects, engineers, and the county planning office. Every I was dotted, every T was crossed. The permits alone cost us $3,000. But we did everything by the book. That Monday morning in May, when I saw those contractors pull up with their equipment, I felt like a kid on Christmas morning. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and for the first time in 30 years, my dream was about. Last time, I shared how 30 years of dreaming finally led to breaking ground on my workshop. But dreams can quickly become nightmares when someone decides your property is their business. What Patricia did next crossed every line imaginable. Picture this. I'm standing on my own land, watching my contractors work when this silver SUV comes racing up my long driveway. Kicking up dust like something out of a Western movie, out steps this woman in her 50s. Perfectly dressed, clipboard in hand, marching toward me like she's leading a military inspection. I'd never seen her before in my life. She walks right up to me and says, "This construction stops now. I'm thinking this is some kind of joke." So I chuckle and say, "I'm sorry. Who are you exactly?" She straightens up even taller and says, "I'm Patricia Williams, president of Meadowbrook Hills Homeowner Association. And you, sir, are in direct violation of our community standards." Now, I've lived in this area for 15 years. I know exactly where I am, and I know I'm not part of any HOA. So I tell her, "Ma'am, I think you're confused. My property isn't part of your association, and this is where it gets unbelievable, folks." She looks me dead in the eye and says, "All properties within a 2-mile radius fall under our oversight for aesthetic compliance. Your ... structure is completely inappropriate for this area." Can you imagine? A 2-mile radius? On what planet does that make any legal sense? I showed her my permits, official county documents, signed and sealed. I explained that everything was legal and approved, but she just shook her head and said something that still makes my blood boil. "I don't care what some county clerk rubber stamped. I'm telling you to stop." When I stood my ground, she got this look in her eyes, this cold, calculating look. She pointed her finger right at my chest and said, "Mr. Thompson, you have no idea who you're dealing with. I've shut down bigger projects than this little shed of yours." Then she turned around and walked back to her SUV. But before she drove off, she rolled down her window and said words that Patricia thought she could intimidate me into abandoning my dream. But when intimidation didn't work, she decided to take matters into her own hands. What happened next crossed the line from harassment into criminal behavior. 2 days later, I'm at work when my phone rings. It's Tony, my general contractor, and I can hear the frustration in his voice. "Mike, we've got a problem," he says. "We can't get to your property? What do you mean you can't get to my property?" "That HOA lady, she's got her SUV parked sideways across your driveway. Says if we step foot on your land, she'll have us arrested for trespassing." Folks, I have to tell you, I saw red. This was my land, my dream, my family's future, and this woman thought she could just block access to my own property. I drove home doing about 15 over the speed limit, which isn't like me at all. But when I pulled up and saw Patricia standing there with her arms crossed, looking smug as could be, something inside me snapped. I walked right up to her and said, "Patricia, you need to move your vehicle right now." She had this little smirk and said, I'm protecting this community from illegal construction. I've called the authorities, and they'll sort this out." "The authorities?" I said. "Great, let's wait for them together." And for just a second, I saw doubt flicker across her face. But she doubled down. "When the sheriff gets here, he's going to see that I'm right and you're wrong. Your little project is over." 20 minutes later, Deputy Johnson pulls up. Now, I'd met him before at a community barbecue. Good man. Fair, been on the force for 12 years. Patricia immediately rushed over to him, talking a mile a minute about violations in illegal construction and community standards. She's waving papers around like they mean something. Deputy Johnson looks at her paperwork, then looks at mine. Takes his time, reads everything carefully. Then he looks at Patricia and says, "Ma'am, this gentleman's property isn't part of your HOA. These permits are valid. You need to move your vehicle." The look on her face, folks. It was like watching someone's whole world collapse. But instead of apologizing, instead of admitting she was wrong, she got angry. "This is ridiculous." She shouted, "I don't care what those papers say. That monstrosity is going to ruin our property values." Deputy Johnson's voice got very serious. "Ma'am, if you don't move your vehicle right now, I'm going to have to cite you for obstruction and possibly trespassing." She finally moved her car, but as she got in, she rolled down the window and said something that chilled me. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. Well, Patricia was about to learn that pushing a patient man too far doesn't make him crazy. It makes him dangerous. This is where I stopped playing defense and went on the attack. For 2 weeks after the deputy's warning, things were quiet. Too quiet. My contractor, Tony, even joked. Maybe she finally got the message. But I had this feeling in my gut that something wasn't right. So I did something I'd never done before. I set up security cameras around my property. Trail cameras, motion sensors, the whole 9 yards. And folks, what those cameras captured over the next week will make your blood boil. Night after night. Patricia was sneaking onto my property. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., sometimes with a flashlight, sometimes with just her phone's light. She was moving stakes, dumping sand in the wrong places. Even, and I'm not kidding, she tried to pour motor oil where we were planning to pour concrete. But the worst part? She brought other people with her. Other HOA board members, neighbors from her subdivision. She had turned this into some kind of neighborhood vigilante mission. I sat in my living room, watching this footage with my wife, Sarah, and she said something that changed everything. "Mike, she's not going to stop. People like this don't stop until someone makes them stop." And that's when I realized being nice, following the rules, taking the high road, none of that was working. Patricia had declared war on my family, and I was still trying to negotiate peace, so I made a decision. I was going to end this once and for all. First, I made copies of every single piece of video evidence. Multiple drives, cloud storage, the works. Then I drove to the sheriff's office and filed formal charges: criminal trespassing, vandalism, destruction of property. Deputy Johnson watched the footage and his jaw just dropped. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "I've been doing this for 12 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this. She's completely lost touch with reality." But I wasn't done. I called a lawyer not to sue, not yet, but to understand my rights. And what I learned changed the game completely. Turns out, what Patricia was doing wasn't just harassment. Under state law, it was organized criminal activity. The fact that she was involving other people planning these activities, targeting my property repeatedly, that elevated it to a felony, my lawyer, David Martinez, put it simply, "Mike, she's asterisk, this is it, folks." The moment when months of harassment, illegal sabotage, and one woman's power trip finally caught up with her. What happened on my property that Thursday morning was so perfectly poetic that it restored my faith in the system. This is how bullies get exactly what they deserve. 9:45 a.m. Thursday morning. The concrete truck is humming. My foundation is taking shape. I'm standing there watching 30 years of dreams become reality. Tony and his crew are working like a well-oiled machine. And then, like clockwork, here comes Patricia's SUV, kicking up gravel as she races up my driveway. But this time, she's not alone. 3 other cars follow her, the whole HOA brigade. She jumps out of her SUV, and folks, she is furious. Angrier than I've ever seen another human being. She marches right up to the concrete truck and starts pounding on the side of it. Stop this right now. She's screaming. This is illegal. This is unauthorized. I am ordering you to stop. Carlos, my concrete truck driver, just looks at her like she's lost her mind. He says, "Lady, I don't work for you. I work for him," and he points at me. That's when Patricia whirls around and sees me standing there, calm as could be with my arms crossed and a little smile on my face. "Thompson," she shouts, "I warned you. I gave you chances. But you wouldn't listen." I said, very calmly, "Patricia, you need to leave my property. Right now, I'm not going anywhere. If the county won't stop you, if the sheriff won't stop you, then I'll stop you myself." And with that, she runs to her SUV and pulls out a 5-gallon bucket filled with ... Get this. Wet concrete mix. She'd brought her own concrete to dump on mine and ruin the pour. She starts running toward my foundation with this bucket. I'll admit, for just a second, I panicked. Months of work, thousands of dollars, all about to be destroyed by this woman's tantrum. But then, right on cue, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world, Sheriff's Department. Everyone freeze. Deputy Johnson and 3 other officers came around the corner of my house, where they'd been waiting for exactly this moment. The look of pure shock